We haven't tried them yet, so we will see.
Yeah. You learn a lot here, like just doing things from absolute scrap. So
Yeah,
we've had a lot of time to experiment during the quarantine. So
some of it's been good.
let's talk about Jesus.
Yeah. um, yeah, so right now we're still on lockdown. They're talking about Monday opening up, so we're able to. It's more like martial law. We're able to leave from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m.
June 1st.
June 1st.
Yeah, they just announced yesterday that they're not going to do that. They bumped us back another week. So
they're going to open it up to letting us leave at 5 p.m. and we're able to drive twice a week instead of just once a week, and nobody can drive on the weekends still. So, and if we have one case or a hint of a case, then it's going to close back down for probably at least a month. So we've been married since November and been on lockdown for
over 2 months.
What seems like longer than that, but yeah. I think day 75 or something, we're hitting close to that. But we're learning how to make a lot of food, so that's cool. Some of it's been good, but
yeah, I think just on the mission side of that, it's kind of surreal when you hit moments like this to realize like you're not in your country with your rights, like it's martial law and you can't say anything about it. You don't have any freedoms to protest about or anything like that. Whatever they say goes. And just reality too for us that there aren't good hospitals close by that we can get to if something goes on. Like we discussed, if either one of us were to get sick, we would probably just stay in the house because we don't know what they would choose to do if we went to a doctor, and we would be completely at their mercy. So it's different to think about those moments and think about like, how would you get home if something did happen? All the roads and all the airports are shut down, and just that reality, I think.
But it's also good to see right now, everything's closed down. A lot of people, and obviously the sad part is that a lot of people are at work, but it's cool to see the community that we've built, the friendships that we've built, the people who come by and talk to us, outside the gate, or who message us on Facebook and just, check in on us. And because sometimes it's our limited Spanish was growing, and then
now we're in the house talking in English all day.
Yeah. So, and then Shelby just started teaching the Pentateuch with our Bible school students. So her Spanish is going to be 10 times better than mine in no time. But it's just been good to see. So yeah, sometimes you think that like, what am I doing? Can they understand what I'm trying to talk to them about? I'm trying to minister to people, and can they understand me? And then they continue to, during this time, they'll continue to come to the house or come by or call or message or whatever it might be, and check in or just ask for prayer. And it's cool to be leaned on and know that even though during this hard time for us too, being stuck inside, that we're still able to minister to those around us.
Yeah. It's one thing that the missionaries that we work with push really hard for, because we have had a larger team. At one point there were 14 people from the States that were here, and they really push like, be very careful not to let those be your people. Don't let that be your circle. And so it's been really cool during this time to see that the people that we miss the most are not the other people from the States. Like, we're missing people from church, we're missing people from the restaurants that we frequent and things like that. And for me, I know last week we talked a little bit about just like getting outside of your comfort zone. And this week, as I was praying, I just started thinking, if I was in the States and I was going to church, then something that I did growing up was I had a 5-friend focus. And so I always had a list of 5 people that I just put my energy into, I put my attention into, like, I want to see these 5 people come to know Jesus. And so I started thinking, like, who are my 5 people in Sakua that don't attend the church, that don't come to any of our programs, that aren't involved in the school? And so I started writing a list, like the lady that's at the taco stand that we go and eat at frequently. And
her daughter just started coming to church.
Yeah, her daughter came, and she showed up to one event for like 10 minutes and then left. So that was like a huge win, even though she didn't stay. But just like thinking of those people in the community that aren't Christians, that don't come to our church, and like making that our focus. But I think for me, one really cool point this week was we have a lady who cleans our house. And when I say that, we all try to employ people the most that we can. It's not that we need or want a maid. It's just that it provides a job for someone in the community. And so we let people cut our grass. We let people come in and sweep and mop or fix random things, like just to give people jobs. And I think we've had 3 different people this week. One, a complete stranger that just walked by and was like, hey, can I pull weeds? You know, just needing money. And so
he might have killed my grass. I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, we try our best not to just hand out money, because then you end up hurting people more than you're helping them, because they become dependent, you know, but giving jobs. And so she was here and she was working in the house, and she just started talking about how much she loved all of us and how she could tell that this was home for us, that we weren't like constantly looking back to get to the States, but this was home. And so that was like a win for me and for us. Like, we've built a relationship that this person's like gonna fill a void if we leave, you know, not that we want to be the ones that are missed. We want them to see Jesus in us, but it's just cool building relationships. And I think a lot of times in missions, you think like you get there and people are just like crying out for the gospel and miracles are happening left and right. And it's like, no, we have to build relationships the same way, you know? So
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, sometimes it does happen for sure, but there's also that daily grind that has to happen.
It's crazy to see the difference between the living and how the Lord moves here in the town, the city, if you will. It's not really a city, but opposed to how the Lord moves in the villages, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours into the jungle, and just how dependent people are in the jungle on the Lord. You know, people here still can go to the doctor. They can still, you know, they have insurance or whatever it might be. And I feel like the Lord moves differently here than he does. He still moves here. I've seen him move multiple times here. But in the interior it's almost like a necessity. So they lean so much more on him. And I can't wait to get back out there.
Yeah.
Cannot wait to get back out there.
I think that's one of the craziest things. Number one, like culturally, they're still very much, if they're not Christians, they're still very much into spiritism and
Animists.
Yeah, the animists. They believe in different gods, waterfall gods or witch doctors or whatever. And so they're still very much open to the spiritual realm. And so it's really cool to see when they come to know Jesus, how open they are and how God uses them in like the gifts of the Spirit. Like, we have the girls in the Hope House that are all teenagers and from the age of 12 to
when 18, 19
when they graduate. And I don't know if any of you know Joel and Lee, or if you saw, but Joel's son, the missionary that we work under, his son did a challenge to climb some mountains to raise money for Speed the Light to buy cars for missionaries. And the last mountain Joel was going to climb with him. And one of the girls in the Hope House had a dream that he couldn't make it to the top. And so she told some of the other girls at the Hope House, Pastor Joel's not going to make it to the top of the mountain. And he didn't. He couldn't finish that climb. And it's just cool to see, because she didn't say anything about it to us then, but weeks later, one of the other missionaries was talking about the different ways that God speaks to us and how he'll speak to us through dreams and all this stuff. And she's like, oh my goodness, like God talked to me that way. And so she starts telling the story of how God had showed her that Joel wasn't going to be able to climb the mountain. And it's cool to see how they're so much more open. You want to tell me about the little girl with the glasses at church?
Michelle? This little girl, when I first came here in 2013, she was just, she might have been 2. And she already had glasses. And when I came back last time, this is my 3rd time being here, going on 3.5 years in total. And last time I was here, she had this thick Coke bottle glasses, couldn't see. She sat in the front of the class at school, and she still squinted to see the board, just horrible vision. And then a group of the students went from the church to about a 4-hour drive away to a little conference, and she was healed. And then she did what all the bad kids do and started sitting in the back of the class and all that, but she was healed, you know. So we've seen a lot of moving from the Lord in that in that way, but we also see stuff on the other side with shamanism or witchcraft, witches, whatever. And that's sometimes it's mixed in the Catholicism here, just the way the South America, all over South America, Latin America culture. But we do have shaman around. So sometimes we see even newer Christians who have been Catholics their whole lives and come to know Jesus, and they still feel like they need to go to the shamans and get healed, or to get whatever the shaman does, a little voodoo junk. But we also see that works. There's power in that, and it's crazy, because to come from a world where it's almost non-existent in the States, it seems like, to come over here and see that they like witchcraft it's real, we hear it all the time, but to see the fruits of it and to see people manifest demons because of it, it becomes real.
And I think the difference between here and the States is that here they call it for what it is. In the States, and please don't mishear what I'm about to say, I totally believe that mental illness is a real thing. But I also believe that there's a portion of that is most definitely a spiritual thing that's going on, and we cover it up and we label it with different medical terms. And I remember working in a clinic in the States and seeing a lady and knowing in my spirit it was a spiritual problem. But and every test they were running was coming back negative. Nothing's wrong with this, nothing's wrong with this. And so they're just handing her all these different pills. And I just knew in my spirit, like, this is a spiritual battle. Like, this is demonic. And I saw the lady, prayed with her. And in the clinic, when I prayed with her, she began to seize, began to foam at the mouth, which you're in the clinic, you have to treat it medically. But I'm sitting here like, I just read about this in my Bible, like, not to say that every seizure is a demon either. I'm not saying that at all. But in this situation, I knew in my spirit that's what it was. That was the last day I saw that woman. And then 6 months later, she comes back in the clinic, and just like a whole new human. Before, she had gotten to the point she couldn't speak to you. She had lost the ability to speak. And I just thought, biblically, the deaf and mute spirit that could come on people. And anyways, long story short, she comes back 6 months later, and I'm sitting there and I'm updating her medical history, and I'm like, so what did they treat you with? What happened? And she looked at me and she said, what actually happened? And I was like, excuse me? Because I had never directly said anything to her about how I was feeling. And she said they sent me to a rehab center, but I ended up with a counselor who was a Christian, and that Jesus was my answer. And it just like blew me away. And I just remember thinking, like, how often in the States is it a spiritual reality that's going on and we just mask it? But here you have the opposite problem, where sometimes it is physical and they're trying to say it's spiritual. Sometimes it is a true mental health problem and they're trying to say it's a demon, so that balance that's there. But I think that's where discernment and prayer, like, we have to really seek God to know the difference, because it's very damaging when you don't know the difference. It's very damaging when you're just trying to guess or act out of your flesh. But we were at a church plant just a couple of weeks before the quarantine started, and a boy came into our service just, I don't even know how to say it except for, like, he was almost in a trance, just head down, not saying anything, slumped over in the chair the whole time. And they kept saying, the pastor came up to me and was like, hey, this guy's sick, can we pray for him after the service? And me and Zach would alternate preaching. He would preach one night of the week and I would preach the other. And that particular night, I literally was going to preach about praying for the sick. And so I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, I actually already had a spot in the situation in the service ready to go to stop and to have that time of prayer. And anyways, long story short, we prayed with the guy, and you could just tell there were so many strongholds there. And afterwards we found out that before he came to church, he had went to visit the shaman. And so, he just was in this total trance. And so it's crazy. We want to just say, like, that shaman stuff's not real, but it totally is. It's Satan, and it's crazy. You'll see people be healed through shamanism. You'll see, sick people recover. But I always think about in the Old Testament, and when Moses went before Pharaoh, and how the magicians were copying what Moses was doing. And so there's definitely power there. There's definitely things that Satan can do. But the interesting thing about that story is that the magicians could never outdo what Moses was doing. And so I think when we look at what we see in the demonic realm, and sometimes we get scared, like, that's intimidating, that's scary. But if we could grasp the fact that the power that we have is greater, then when we look at how great that power is on display, we should be able to say, like, so what's within me? Because it's got to be bigger than that. It's got to be more powerful than that. And for me, that's super humbling. I know when we came back from that service, I thought, like, I talked to Zach and I was just like, if Satan can so control a person, how much more should the Holy Spirit control me? You know? And so that's just really, it's really eye-opening when you see it for what it is. They don't cover it up with science. It's not covered up with medicine. It is what it is here. And that's really challenging and calls you to be in a deeper place yourself with the Lord.
Well, enough about us. You have any questions about us? I don't know if anybody has any questions. Want to go ahead and open it up for a Q&A. I know Chris he's got probably a book full.
Yes,
so
I got like 10. If
he has questions, he will jump in and be selfish and ask his questions. So please feel free at any time to unmute yourself or hit spacebar. I heard it works.
Yeah, you can just hold the spacebar while you speak. We discovered that the other day.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah.
I do have about 5 questions, but I'd like anyone else to jump in that has a question so I don't monopolize it. So I'll give that opportunity, but if no one says anything, I'm loaded.
Okay.
All right. One of the, and maybe if anything kind of gives some other people to bridge off some questions, but first off, just love hearing you guys talk. So thank you for sharing what's going on there and just what you're experiencing and that demonic reality. I know, Zach, you've mentioned, I'm sure Shelby, you've been exposed to this as well, but I know in talking with you, you've mentioned that there's some people who have never heard about Jesus. And I'm sure that I know that exists in the United States, but I think just with our media and access to television, things like that, that somebody's going to be exposed. So can you just talk about those experiences that you've had that, and I believe you've said even you've gone into villages where you're the first like white person that they've seen. Maybe I'm putting words into things that didn't happen, but if you can just kind of elaborate on either of those two things and your experiences with that.
Yeah, coming from the Bible Belt of the South, we always think, oh, everybody knows Jesus. Everybody says they're a Christian, but it's by word only most of the time. And here, there are over 500 villages in and throughout the Amazon jungle, just in Ecuador. We have 7 to 8 unreached tribal groups here, and we have been able to get into 2 of those tribal groups, the Shuar and the Akshwar, and 2 completely separate groups.
They each have a lot of villages.
Yeah, they each have a lot of villages.
It's not like 7 villages. It's like a people group with their own communities.
Yeah, sorry. And we have 70 plus churches, and that's just the buildings itself. Now, house churches that are out there, I would say it's more around 100. And that's 8 hours in a canoe and then 6-hour hike, 10-hour hike, and then, stay the night and then get up and hike further out. I mean, now we're talking some of the most remote places here in the jungle. And they don't know anything but animism. Most of them believe in a higher power. So they're kind of understanding of a God, if that makes sense. They're not as hard to talk to about the Lord as an atheist would be here, as one who doesn't believe in a higher power. But so it makes it a little bit easier. I know I've been in villages personally where I was the first white person in there. I don't speak Shuar, and I don't speak English very well either. I'm still working on Spanish, and you go into those villages. Well, one of the roles we have is always bring somebody with you that speaks the language. So we always go in with Shuar pastors, which we have a group of Shuar missionaries / pastors, and always go out with them. And I remember the first time I went into a village, that a white person had ever been before. It was 2017, the beginning of 2017, and we didn't really know where the village was at. The pastor had been there, but it would have been 21 years before, and so they didn't really know we were coming. So it was a very surprising moment for the community. And we walk into the village, finally found the village, walk into the village, and we see that the chief of the village is gone. And so we were talking to a lady and 3 teenage boys. And these 2 pastors we had with us, it was me and my friend Seth from Alabama. Yeah. Anyways, him and I were the first white people in this village, and they're in there. Sometimes when they start speaking Schwar, you don't know if they're laughing, if they're yelling at each other and cussing each other out. I mean, you just don't know because they're always loud. And they were talking for about 10 to 15 minutes, and Seth and I look at each other and we just, take a couple steps back just in case, and then an angel appears out of nowhere. Well, there was a guy named Angel who came up from behind us and came in the conversation, and he kind of cooled everything down. And we went to the little communal building. Every community has a communal building, which is really just like a pole barn, an open area, covered area. And we sat down there, and they gave us a service that night and let us stay the night there. And we got up the next morning. They said we could have another service that morning, and then we had to leave. And that night, 4 people got saved. And then after the service, 3 of them came and talked to us. And all these people are majority of the people that we were with were Catholic, in a rough sense of the word. A lot of shamanism and everything like that. So a little skewed belief in there. But the 3 people who came up to afterwards were saying that they were evangelicals before. They believed and they were baptized, and they believe in Jesus and they were baptized and everything. But they couldn't say that they were evangelicals because the community would kick them out. Their families would kick them out. They would shun them. They would have nothing to do with them. So as they came together in private before the service, and they were like, well, we got to do it now. If a group of us do it and accept Christ, then it'll be okay. And 3 out of the 4 rededicated their lives, and the last person actually gave his life for the first time to the Lord. And now there's a church there. There is an evangelical church there. I remember in 2012, a village that we frequent a lot now, actually, there was a team from North America, and there was a black girl on the team, and they could not believe that her skin was real. The color of her skin was real. They came up, all the kids came up and were touching her face, and they thought she was dirty. So they started trying to wipe off the dirt. And it was just, they had no concept of it. They don't have books out there with that. They don't have a TV, anything like that to see this. So like the reality hit, like, oh my gosh, there are other people that are not like us in the world. So there's just a lot of different perspectives, mindsets that you come in contact with while you're out there. And sometimes you're just like, I can't believe that they don't know about this, or they have never thought about this. So I hope that answered at least one of the questions.
Yeah, that was awesome. You've mentioned there the fact that they couldn't mention that they were evangelists. Is there any other persecution that you've been aware of, observed, experienced yourself, or any times that you felt unsafe?
Myself personally, no. Sometimes it's unsettling to go up. I mean, usually go into a bus, and there's been trips where I just go out by myself with another pastor, and that's kind of unsettling a little bit. You're out there in their territory, and normally North Americans are seen as money. We have a lot of money. They think that Shelby and I are rich. to them we might be, because of just, I mean, the limited resources that are here for them. But we've had people pulled out of canoes at gunpoint, because of their skin color and them thinking that they're of the government and they're trying to spy on the people out there. And I mean, when I go out there with just one other pastor for a quick trip, there'll be people staring at me and talking about us and pointing us out. And it's just like, what can you do? You know, just stay close to the people you know. And we have, bless the Lord, we have good rapport with a lot of the people out there. So not too many people mess with us. But sometimes it is unsettling to be out there because you have more than a lot of them do in your backpack. And so, I mean, they could just easily take you out and just so they can get a hammock. I mean, it's stuff like that. And no, the cops don't patrol out there. There's nothing. The government doesn't go out there unless they're trying to take the land. And it's sometimes it's pretty unsafe, but we try to do everything, make sure everybody knows that we're coming out, make sure the village knows we're coming out. We have canoes ready. We have people who speak the language come out with us. So we try to play it as safe as we can, and set it up for success every time, but definitely dependent on the Lord every time we go out.
Yeah, and there's also like a process, just like he's talking about, where you like go in with your native Shwar pastors first, letting them go in, and then slowly. For me, the first time I ever came down here on a team, my team was the first team to get to go into a village because they had spent some time with just the pastors and then just a couple of the guys from the States, and slowly built that relationship to the point that the team could go in. But I remember Joel telling us before we got off the bus, if at any point I say go, just get on the bus. Don't say anything, just walk to the bus and we're leaving. Because it was just like, you know, if at any point they decide they don't want us there, or they, you know, whatever, then it's time to go. In this particular village, the family that was a Shwar family, the guy had gotten saved and become the pastor, and they had doused his family in gasoline and threatened to kill them because they brought the gospel into the village. And so it was not too terribly long after that we were going in, long enough to protect the team, but this was the first team they were bringing into that village. And so it's just using wisdom, using discernment, and really, you want to just plow in there with the gospel, but you do have to build relationship. You have to take your time. And I remember another story that stands out to me. It wasn't us, but Joel and Leah talk about a day when they went on a picnic with their family. And we're just driving around looking for new areas kind of out in the valley, and stopped at one place, and we're going to have a picnic. And then the Holy Spirit just began to deal with Joel and Leah, like, you need to leave right now. And so they're in the middle of about to eat this picnic with their family, and they just pack everything up and they leave. And later, correct me if I don't have the details of this wrong, but later on, these two guys got saved in the church and ended up coming up to them and saying, you know, I don't know if it had been like a year ago, you were out having lunch with your family, and me and my buddy were there, and we were about to come and kill you, and you just left out of nowhere. And
that was actually one of those guys is actually the pastor. They doused in gasoline, him and his family. He actually, it was like 2 a.m. It's about a 45-minute to an hour drive from here, the community is. And they walk all the way here, and at 2 a.m. they're knocking on Joel's door, asking for help, asking for something to do because the village wants to kill them if they don't get out. But now they weren't allowed to build a church, so they extended their front patio and they put chairs out, and they read the Bible every Sunday morning. It's not a church service, but you can come and hang out if you want. So they worked their way around it, and there is a church there now. They don't call it a church, but there's a church there now. So, and that guy who they try to kill is now a pastor with us. So.
And we have, just like a side note, the literacy rate is not very high when you get out. And so we have what we call proclaimers, which are these speakers that play the gospel in Shwar. And so sometimes they'll just like set that down at somebody's house and play it, and then everybody can come and sit around and listen. to the Bible in Schwar. So.
It has a solar panel on it, and so it recharges with the sun. It's about 8 inches long, about 4 inches tall, and they like to listen to everything on volume 11, and it is sometimes it's annoying, but in this case it's really good because nothing else is going on in the community's way out there. So when they turn it on, the whole entire community can hear the Bible being read. So it's in their own language in Schwar. So it's really cool to see that happening.
Just kind of like a funny bit too. I don't know what it is, but for the large majority, Ecuadorians cannot clap on beat.
Oh my gosh.
They cannot. I don't care if you're in a church in the city or if you're in the middle of the jungle. They cannot clap on beat. And the women always sing in this unbelievable high pitch, like
nasally.
I mean, just make your ears bleed.
If you ever heard me sing, it's probably like that.
and so it's like, it's humorous. We'll joke about it, but at the same time, it's like if you can have a Holy Spirit throwdown with some offbeat clapping and that horrible high pitched, like I think sometimes we like condition things just right, and it's more the music giving us chill bumps than the Holy Spirit. But when you're sitting there and you like are in the middle of this horrible, like, what even is this? But it's the most pure thing in the world, and the Holy Spirit just meets you there. Like, that's just really cool. So it's like humorous, but also challenging of, you know, how comfortable do I have to be to meet with Jesus versus, you know, this situation without the resources, with the crazy singing and swatting mosquitoes and standing in mud, you know. Like
it's just about how bad do you want it. I remember a time going to a youth service and teaching the kids, and the pastor never showed up, and instead of not having service, none of the other people showed up in the church except for 2 women, and I hope they were not the worship leaders, but they didn't miss worship. Those 2 ladies sang the entire time we were doing the kids service. They didn't miss church. They had that presence of the Lord there fresh with them. And it was just amazing to hear that they were crying. I mean, it's just crazy how the Lord moves whenever you're expectant and you're not trying to have everything perfect.
Spirit and truth.
It's more about him than it is about sound. It's more about him than it is about what words getting preached. It's more about him than anything else that is going on. Nobody else showed up but 2 women, and the Lord still showed up.
Yeah. And nothing, you know, I think we should do things with excellence when we have those abilities, absolutely. But sometimes I think we get lost in the pursuit of excellence, and we miss that spirit and truth element, you know. So it's challenging and eye-opening.
Well, I know that we've been on for a little bit, and I want to ask a question, and again, not dictating that this is over after this question by any means, but what you said last week really resonated with me on challenging ourselves and being willing as opposed to being, you know, the most talented or anything. And so, not that everything else you said has not given us tons to take away from, but just something that I think will help us apply possibly what you guys experience on a daily basis. Pastor Michael mentioned something such as a hand up versus a hand out. And I know that you guys mentioned, Shelby specifically, you said you want to be helping people, not hurting people. I know there's a book out there that I believe is called When Helping Hurts, when especially when we go into these areas where you're at, and we want to love on people, but we do so at a risk of saying you're dependent on me. So what would you say you've been taught to kind of help that boundary of, I want to give you a hand up, not just a hand out, and to make sure that you're not hurting, and maybe how you could then see how that could be applied to helping in the United States, where we are challenging people to be in position to come to the Lord themselves, and not necessarily just giving handouts constantly, because we think that's the Christian thing to do, right? We want to help, but not understanding what we're actually causing as far as giving limitations or placing limitations on those people.
I think we've touched on it a little bit this morning. I think the biggest thing is building relationships. You know, a lot of times in the States, especially, I'm thinking back to when I was when I helped start a homeless ministry, we just went out and gave out food, never spent time with the people, maybe 5 minutes, and prayed and left. There was no relationship building there. And then it turned into a friend of mine and I would go and just sit with the homeless at Home Depot. We didn't have any money, we didn't have any food, we didn't have anything. So I think relationship building, spending time more than just money on them. I think we see a lot of monetary value in a lot of things we do because that's our focus. I mean, that's the American dream, you know. Here we say time is gold, or is it time is gold? Tiempo es oro.
Tiempo es oro.
Yeah, time is gold. And that's how it is in the States, you know, time is money. And that's all we think about. Here, like what Shelby was saying earlier, you know, we try to help people out, but we give them a job to do as well, to want to earn that money, or to earn, you know, whatever food, you know. A lot of people here don't have the family to go to. You know, I could go to, I can name off, you know, 100 people I can go to and say, hey, can I borrow $10 until next week? You know, and here they, you know, $10 is, a good wage is $20 a day, and you're working 8, 9, 10 hours on that for that $20. So $10 is a lot of money. So they don't have a lot of people to go to if, you know, they don't have rice. If something happens, and, you know, a couple of years ago, the farms, there's something that hit the farms and a lot of the crops died all around Sakua. So they were all a lot of money because of that. And so a lot of people were hurting. But we were able to give loans out. When we do, another thing we do is that when we do give loans out, we ask them to pay it back, whether it's $5 a week, you know, whatever they think they can do. And even when teams come, they like to leave clothes here with us, and we give it to the pastors if they want anything. And then we've built a relationship with the pastors. We have a group of about 10 pastors that have been working with us for about 12 years now. So they understand it's not just a handout. They understand that we're trying to better them as well. But the other people at the church will sell all the clothes for, you know, each piece of clothing for $1. It's not just a handout. You come, it's almost like a Goodwill kind of thing. You know, we're trying to help them but let them know that there's also a price to be paid for some things. Right now we're working on trying to get bags put together for, you know, 3 or 4 days worth of food in those bags. And I think there's just discernment in that too, because I think that right now nobody can pay, and it's about keeping people and families alive at this point. So giving them food is something that we might start doing here in the next week or two. And there has to be discernment in that. If you're in the interior and people see you and you're giving out $1 here and $1 there, and, you know, $2 or $3 to this person, then every time you go out, they're going to say, hey, where's my money? You know, and if you don't have it, then who knows what they'll do to you, or if they'll let you back in the village or what. So I think there's a lot of discernment in that.
Yeah, I think you have to, like, very clearly draw the line of what we're here for. And it's hard, like, you come in, and I was thinking about this yesterday. Now I don't want to say that I'm, like, numb to the need, but it's normal. It's culture to me now to see houses the way I see them, to see, you know, people doing what they're doing and living the way they're living. I think when you come in first from the States, you're in such a shock because there's such a contrast between how you live and how they live. But just because they're not living at the level that we would think is quality life doesn't mean that it's not quality life here, you know. And so just, like, giving that time to adjust. But as far as, like, relating it back to the States, I was thinking when I was in college, a group of friends and I would go out every Saturday night and spend time just talking with people on the streets. And we try to be really intentional, not to just be like random evangelism, hitting people, which is, I think there's a time and a place for, but we were really intentional about building relationships with the homeless people of the city, to the point where, like, first they give you their fake names, and then after you've known them for several months, they start to tell you their real name and their real story. And I remember this one, it was Valentine's Day, And I had decided I'm gonna go get a blanket. I was living in Missouri and it was cold. I was like, I'm gonna get a blanket, I'm gonna get a meal from McDonald's, and I'm gonna get like some little chocolates or something and just go bless a lady on the street on Valentine's Day. And so I walked downtown and it was super weird because there weren't usually I knew exactly where to go to find people and I couldn't find anybody anywhere. And I had a friend with me and finally came across this one woman, and I went to walk up and hand her the stuff, and she was like, do you have any change? And I was like, no, ma'am, and I genuinely didn't, because every time I went downtown, I intentionally didn't take any money with me for that very reason, so it wouldn't just be hands out. And I was like, no, ma'am, I don't have any change, but I have a meal, I have a hot meal, and here's a blanket. And she was like, I just need change. And I was just like, I don't have that, but would you like to have this? And she looked at me and she said, I don't need your handout, I need change. And I walked away, and it, like, first I was like, why is this woman not just being grateful for a hot meal? I know she needs one. I know it's cold tonight, but the Holy Spirit just began to deal with me. Like, sometimes we get this plan in our head of how we want to help someone and how we think it would be best. And we think that we see their needs, and we're not listening to what is actually their need and what they're actually wanting in that moment. And I think sometimes even, you meet someone in the States and you think that you're aware of where they're hurting, and you think the root of the problem and how you can help them, but you have to really take the time to pray and ask the Lord to show you and to listen to what's really going on in that person's life and where is the need at. And as Christians, like, yeah, we want to help people if they don't have food on their table. We want to help people if they, have these different needs. But number one, like, where are they at spiritually? Where are they hurting? Where's the real deficit? And I think this quarantine worldwide has really revealed where the church is helping and where the church is hurting, because we went into this like widespread panic when we couldn't be in the building anymore, and it's just like, what does that say about how we're doing church if people are so reliant on being spoon-fed every Sunday that they just freak out on what to do if they can't go back? And so are we helping or are we hurting in the way that we're discipling people? Are we giving them everything that they need, or are we calling them and challenging them to dig for what they need? And so I think it's a physical principle and it's a spiritual principle. Like, we can come by and somebody just needs to buy a bag of rice. We can give them a bag of rice, or we can pull them in and give them a job and teach them, work ethic and things. And there's times when we do just give a handout. There's times when we just feel that need and we do that. But I've heard a quote a million times, I'm sure you have as well, like, you can give a man a fish, or you can give him a hook and teach him how to fish. And then you fed him for the rest of his life instead of that one moment. And I think that applies spiritually in discipling someone as well. You can speak into their life all day long. You can be there at 2:00 in the morning every time they call to pray for them. But we eventually create this group of people that think that only the pastors know how to really get to Jesus, And if I have a crisis, if there's not a pastor here, then what, how's God going to move in this situation? And I think there's got to be that point too where we call people to step up and grow and not just give them everything, And so I think just globally, for me, this quarantine has been this moment of like, what happens to the flock, what happens to the congregation post-quarantine is going to be the proof of how well people were actually discipled versus how dependent they were on the pulpit. And I think that's just been something that I've been examining here with our relationships as well.
Man, that is just awesome. And I think that, just as you said, the quarantine is going to really show how have we been when training people up. And when we hear this demand for, let's get back to meeting on Sunday services, is it simply because I want to be spoon-fed? Yes, there's an importance for us to have fellowship and gathering with one another as evidence of why we're all on here today, just to be able to connect and have that social time. And the Bible is very clear on do not forsake the gathering with other believers to encourage and whatever. But it does seem that we all go to one person to get the encouragement rather than coming in ready to share what the Lord is doing in each of our lives. But, well, I know we've been on for a while, and just appreciate your guys' time so much. And I do recognize that Pastor Layton's at work. So if it's all right with him, I'm going to close us out in prayer. And we do want to just be continuing. This is helpful to know what your guys' needs are too, so that we can be in constant prayer with you and for the people that you're ministering to. I do believe Pursue Life is contributing to missions, correct? So if people do want to financially help, is that the best way for them to give through Pursue Life? That'll make its way to you? Okay. And so I would encourage those that feel led. There is, not to make this about money, but what they're able to do is do in great part, I know, because missionaries do exist with the Lord's provision through donations. And so on the Pursue Life app, there is, or where the giving tab, you can scroll down to missions, and we can give to them that way. But definitely, I know that they would covet your prayers. So let's go ahead and go into prayer right now